your face. So anyway.
Oh, yeah. Well, we are live now. So hi to everybody who's joining. Welcome to our live Q&A with Dr. Dean Burnett. Yeah, it's great to see you all. If you do want to introduce yourself in the chat, like maybe where you're from, that's always really nice to see who's here and where you're coming from. But yeah, we were just chatting before the session, and we wanted to kick things off by asking you all how you would define an emotion. It's quite a difficult question, but if you could just give a little answer, whatever you think sounds right, that would be great. What about you, Dean? How would you define an emotion?
Well, that's sort of that's a very tricky question. That's the whole genesis of the book. In that, it's a bit of a convoluted story as to how it came about. But I did agree. I proposed a book about emotions and how they work and the science thereof. And my publishers thought, yeah, that's a good idea. People are interested in that. Because I'd been led to believe, I don't think it was an active decision, but it had happened, that the science of emotions was well established, well known, and everyone knows what they are, to the point where we've sort of moved on to more important things like memory, perception, consciousness, and stuff. And so I sat down to write this book. I say, so an emotion is, we have to find the right definition. And yeah, it's been like 3 years now. Still haven't found one. Still haven't found a good definition. Like I thought people have one. A lot of people, like especially people who research them, they do have a definition of emotions, but just no one has the same one, which is in the scientific realm. It's obviously quite tricky, isn't it? It's it's kind of hard to sort of all agree on what you're studying when no one can even define it. And there have been attempts to work out a viable definition of emotions, which everyone sort of agrees on. So very early on in the book is a study by emotion researcher Carol Izzard, who went around to all the different emotional researchers they could get access to and said, what is an emotion from your perspective? And they took all the definitions and put them into one big one, which sort of incorporated all the different things everyone sort of seems to agree on, or things kept popping up. And just for the sake of the listener, so this definition after was emotion consists of neural circuits brackets that are at least partially dedicated to closed brackets response systems and a feeling state / process that motivates and organizes cognition and action. Emotion also provides information the person experienced it and may include adaptation, cognitive appraisals, and ongoing cognition, including an interpretation of feeling state expressions or social communicative signals that may motivate approach or avoidant behavior, exercise control / regulation of responses, and be social relational in nature. So, I mean, I guess to me that's one of those definitions where when you hear it, you actually know less than you did before you started. You're just like, okay, now I'm less intelligent about this. So yeah, the search for a definition of emotion is ongoing. So
yeah, it's interesting because normally when you think of science and research, it's normally you think of there's one right answer, but with emotions, it's not really like that. But I guess it makes sense because emotions are subjective for everybody. That it would be hard to pin it down. But saying that, I don't know how I define an emotion. If anyone else has any thoughts, please let us know. I don't know. I did think before I read the book, I thought it would be like feelings or whether you're happy or sad, which it is. But obviously, it's so much more complex than that. There's so many more different processes involved that I never really considered. But we do already have some comments from Lisa. Hi, Lisa. Lisa's actually here because she's setting up a research project on this. So she'd like, it's a question here. So I might leave this for when we get into the Q&A. There's actually 2 really good questions. But yeah, so no, we've already got some great questions. Thanks, Lisa. But yeah, everyone else, if you just want to like introduce yourself or where you're tuning in from, that would be great to see. But yeah, we're just talking about our own definitions of emotions, if you have one. It's obviously quite complex, which is the whole basis of the book. So there's no wrong answer.
Yeah, it's sort of like it's like everyone sort of recognizes them. Everyone sort of understands on a sort of instinctive level what they are and can see them when they happen. They're a big part of everything we do and think. But again, it's like art. If you ask someone like art or what isn't art,
Yeah.
You're just like, you just know, it's one of those. I say it's too integral. It's too intimate for us. Like it's a big part of trying to sort of define your emotions objectively, rationally. It's sort of like trying to look at your own retina.
Yeah.
I mean, technically the equipment's there, but you can't, because it's just too ingrained, too much part of the process. So, yeah, it makes it difficult to write a book about it. I'll say that.
Yeah, I can imagine. We've got some people introducing themselves. So Claire saying hello from Kent. Jane is from County Durham. Hello, everybody. I'm in London right now. Dean, you're in Cardiff, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Lovely. So we've got a good answer from Tessa to our question, who said that, interestingly, emotions seem to be affected by physical health and vice versa. So really important to understand. Body language is one real way of seeing an emotion. Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
true. Yeah, that can be like how you define emotions, how you see people and read what they're feeling.
Yeah, that's actually the genesis of emotional research from the Stoics, ancient Greece. They sort of recognized that emotions have a physical component, so they are definitely there. Like even back then, before the days of scanning, they was like, well, clearly something's happening, something biological, because when we have an emotional response, our body does stuff, and that sort of gives them a tangible presence.
Yeah, that actually leads us on to Lisa's answer to the question, who she's also said she's a Facebook friend of Dean, as I love his work and Cat Pickle. But her partner says that they're defining emotions as bodily states, which is kind of what you were saying. The emotions cause different bodily states.
Yeah, there is also a sort of a school of thought, not the dominant one, but it's kind of omnipresent. It's consistent that the bodily state actually is the key part of emotions, not the brain. It's sort of like something happens to us and our body reacts in certain ways, and that combination of reactions is fed into our brain, and our brain goes, oh, that must mean I'm happy, that must mean I'm angry, that must mean I'm sad. It's the somatic marker hypothesis. It's, like I say, it's not the most convincing one, but there is certainly an element of it. The idea that emotions happen in the brain, but the brain's like like a bricklayer, and your body's like the architect saying, here's what you do, here's what we need, build this. And so it's an interesting school of thought, if nothing else.
Yeah, Tessa's commented, fight or flee.
Was a big part of it. I mean,
that's very true.
The fundamental nature of emotions comes up a lot.
So the chat is kind of stabling at the moment, so it might be a good chance to get into the Q&A if you're ready, Dean.
Sure, yeah, of course.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining, and thanks as well to the Virtual Village Hall for helping us to host the session. I'm Annabel, and I'm here from Listening Books. For any of you who aren't familiar with what we do, we are an audiobook charity here in the UK, and we provide audiobooks for people whose disability, mental illness, or learning difficulty affects their ability to read. We do regular chats here at the Virtual Village Hall, so I think they'll be sharing our details, and if you think we could help, just check us out. But today we are here to talk to Dr. Dean Burnett all about his latest book, Emotional Ignorance: Misadventures in the Science of Emotion. Thank you, Dean, for joining us today.
And thank you for having me. Always appreciate it.
I am going to give a quick introduction to Dean, just to start us off, if you don't mind. Dr. Dean Burnett is a neuroscientist, blogger, sometimes comedian, and author. He's also an honorary research fellow at Cardiff University Psychology School, and has been awarded the Public Engagement in Neuroscience from the British Neuroscience Association. His previous books, The Idiot Brain and The Happy Brain, were international bestsellers, and his articles for The Guardian have been read over 16 million times. But today we have the pleasure of learning more about Emotional Ignorance, Dean's latest book. So should we get started on emotional ignorance then? There it is.
Visual prompt there.
We'll get started then, and we already have a few questions, but if you do have any more questions, just pop them in the chat and we'll try and get through as many as possible. But while we're waiting for those to get through, Dean, it would be great if you could just give a brief overview to the book for anyone who hasn't read or listened to it yet.
Well, it's a sort of mentioned just in the chat just now, but it's a very convoluted genesis of this particular book. It wasn't as straightforward as my other ones, and those were quite tricky anyway. But So like we mentioned The Happy Brain, one of my previous books, and when I published that, I was doing like the publicity rounds, the events, and one common question I got was, you've written a book all about happiness, why not any other emotion? And I thought, I think people were genuinely meant well, but it's quite a backhanded compliment. It's like basically saying, you wrote this book, why not write a different book? It's not, thank you. Glad you enjoyed. Which is, but it clearly was, it kept happening. So it clearly was a lot of curiosity about emotions in general. So I thought, what, I should maybe do a book all about the the general science of emotions as a whole. Because, again, I mentioned the chat, I was under the impression it was established science. Like in the world of neuroscience, we kept mentioning emotions like an offhand manner. And then X happens, and then emotional response, and then Y happens. And as if it was just part of the process. So I was under the impression that emotions were one of the earliest things we dealt with in when neuroscience and psychology were a thing. And just like, okay, done that, let's go on to the proper stuff. And I thought, well, that'll make for a nice, light, breezy book about emotions and stuff. So I sat down to write it after agreeing that I would to my publishers. And I think we said in the discussion, I got stuck on the first question, what is an emotion? And that took about 3 months to realize there is no concrete answer. And then every time I found an answer to something, 7 more questions popped up, and slowly realized that it's a very, very complex and mysterious world. And what I thought was moving on from emotions was more like a conspiracy of silence. Like, we don't know what those are. Let's just never mention them, and hopefully no one's going to ask us questions. And which is, again, unhelpful when you're trying to write about them. So I had to revise the idea for the book 7 or 8 times and take different drafts of it. I kept coming unstuck, and generally thought I wouldn't be able to do it. I thought, I proposed this book. I don't think I can write this because I'm not. It's just what I thought was established science isn't. So I was going to sort of throw in the towel, essentially, which I've never done before. It's not a common occurrence. But then the pandemic hit, and we were all isolated, locked down, and all that. And much hate to say it, one of the first victims, earliest victim, was my own father, who passed away unexpectedly from COVID. He wasn't even 60, so it was a very, very obviously trying emotional time. Something I'm still dealing with, obviously, and we've all been through it. But I was sat there stuck at home, in the deepest part of lockdown, unable to go anywhere, unable to do anything. No one was able to come and help me with 2 small children. Who I was responsible for, and my wife as well. Of course, I'm just me. But all I had was a lot of free time, a head full of roiling emotions, and a contract to write a book about emotions. So I thought, maybe I should combine these things, and at least if nothing else, it'll be a distraction. So I did. I sort of unpacked and dissected my own emotional state. So, okay, why am I experiencing this? What is it about this experience that leads to these? And it provided a sort of thread, a sort of like a landmark to come back to whenever I got unstuck. So the whole book's about that now. It's about sort of like my journey through and deciphering and understanding my emotions, where they come from and why I had them, and why everyone else does too. And it made some very, very interesting discoveries and very illuminating insights which I found really helpful. So hopefully others can hear or read the book and feel the same.
Yeah, no, it was really helpful. And I must say, when I first heard about the book, and that it was about emotions, I expected it to be kind of like a self-help book about controlling your emotions and like suppressing them even. And obviously it's pretty much the opposite. You're like exploring them very deeply, which is great. And it was so much more helpful than what I expected. But I wonder, why do you think there is this kind of common misconception that the best way to deal with your emotions is to control them rather than understand them?
Yeah, I mean, in the short term, it's just it can be easier. I think it's a simple solution, Cole, is that people sort of quickly realize when they have an emotional response to something, they don't make the most helpful decisions from an objective, logical point of view. And obviously, the media sort of reflects that a lot. I mean, in the world of science, there's so much that happens as part of the scientific process, which is basically intended to remove emotions from the decision-making process. Double blinding and declarations of interest. All this stuff is that when we do in science, you have to have as objective data as possible. You can't have your own biases involved. It ruins everything because that's not how the underlying reality works. So that's part of the process itself, and that sort of bleeds over into people's understanding of how things work. And in the mainstream, there's like this whole sci-fi it's such a common trope in sci-fi if something doesn't have emotions, it'll be mentally superior to us. From the Vulcans of Star Trek, the machines of Matrix and Terminator, like these things are immune to emotions, so they are better. They can do more stuff. So I think that sort of idea has become sort of commonplace. And you see it online as well. Like you get usually guys, almost always guys, like, well, your argument's relevant because I don't use emotions. I use logic and reason in my arguments. Is it? Yeah, when you tell them they don't, they get really angry, which obviously is I feel undermines their point somewhat. But yeah, but emotions aren't logical. They aren't rational. They aren't objective. And thinking logically and rationally is something we can do. And I don't know. People think we should separate emotions from the process entirely. But one thing I did discover is that if you do that, you really have no reason to think logically. When you think logically, work something out rationally, you feel good about doing that, which is an emotional response. So emotions motivate us to think logically. So already you can see there's the flaw there. But yeah, they are messy. They are uncomfortable. They make us feel bad all the time. And good, but also all the time bad. And that, people like shy away from that. And this idea that, you can avoid and suppress bad feelings and just carry on regardless. There's the whole capitalist side of things. I don't care about your mental health, just do your job. That sort of approach is quite endemic. When people in the NHS have all these resilience workshops to not feel stressed about bad experiences, and it doesn't work like that. I know they're inconvenient, but they don't. And so there's lots of factors which make us want to downplay the influence of emotions.
Yeah. It just makes things easier, doesn't it? But I don't think sometimes that's the best route.
No,
I'll head back to our question from Lisa earlier, who's asked, can Dean explain whether there is a difference between positive emotions and positive affect?
Positive, do you mean affects or effects?
Affect.
Yeah. Positive affect. Well, we call it affective neuroscience when you study emotions in the scientific sense, not emotional neuroscience, affective. Affect, as my understanding, is like the raw materials of emotions. Like just how atoms lead to molecules, lead to substances. Affect leads to discrete and distinct emotional states. And affect can be positive or negative, positive valence, negative valence. It can be pleasant and rewarding, or negative and unpleasant, things we don't like, discomforting, causing distress and things like that. So at the most basic levels, that's sort of the difference between positive and negative affect. The main difference would be that a positive emotion is sort of it's more complex, it's more constructed. And that's where a lot of the current debate in the world of emotion science is, because there's a lot of, for a long time, the dominant school of thought was that emotions are, or primary emotions are like inbuilt. Like we have 6, 7, 4, depends who you ask, distinct primary emotions, like you would do keys on a keyboard, or like which would be the big ones: anger, happiness, fear, disgust. Like all those. And every emotional state we have is like a combination of those, like different symphonies, different piano keys and stuff like that. But we don't learn those things; they're just there. Just like we don't learn to have 5 fingers on a hand, we don't learn to have 5 different distinct emotions. That was a dominant view for a while, based a lot of research into facial expressions and how they manifest and like how they aren't learned and stuff. But more recent studies and analysis have shown actually it's not quite that simple. Now there's a big school of thought which argues it's a constructivist approach, in that our brain creates our emotions like on the fly, essentially. Same templates used again and again, but it learns how to respond emotionally over time. And that's why emotions are always tweaking, being updated and things like that. And it does sound quite unlikely, like the idea that these emotions which we all have are so profound, they and that's quite a big thing. But it brings a lot. Like memories are they are constructed from different discrete elements, and visual stimuli is a big part of our it's built up from discrete parts of our brain. So so affect is like the building blocks of emotion, but they can both be positive and negative, as I understand it.
Okay, thank you. Lisa's got another question asking, is interest an emotion or curiosity?
I've not seen it defined as such. I'm not seeing anyone say interest and curiosity, but it's that's where the whole debate becomes part of the, because it's especially intriguing. Because you see, like, there's that big list, the lexicon of emotional terms which don't have a translation. Like, obviously, Schadenfreude would be the obvious one, like the satisfaction you get from another person's mispleasure or misfortune, and obviously the Welsh, or the longing for a feeling of home and things like that. So, I mean, I think there will be emotional factors, a need, a yearning to want to find something, but I don't think curiosity itself would be described as an emotion. It would be a motivation, but emotions and motivation have a lot of overlap. So they have the same Latin origin word, move, I think, which explains why they sound so similar. So I don't think they are, but I think there's a lot of overlap there.
A question I had about, you talk about motivation in the book, and obviously we're going into spring finally, and a lot of people are now having the motivation to change things up, do a spring cleaning, kind of reboot. I wonder if you could talk a bit about the secrets of emotion and how we can motivate ourselves, motivation, I mean, how we can motivate ourselves to go about doing this spring cleaning.
Yeah, it's a strangely human thing in that, emotions are how less complex species tend to navigate the world. That's bad, scared, run away. That's good, happy, eat that. That sort of basic cognitive processing is how they sort of navigate life. Whereas we have more long-term abilities. We can envisage, okay, if I do this now, this will happen later. Delayed gratification. We can turn down immediate rewards for the sake of knowing that a better reward will come in time. And that's a big part of the whole cleaning aspect. It's not fun to clean unless you're really into that, which some people are. Don't want to kink shame, as they say, but yeah. But anyway, it's a lot of effort, and your immediate emotional reaction will be, "Oh, don't want to do that," because it's a lot of effort. Because your brain doesn't like effort being spent for no reason. "Quote unquote," no reason is obviously a very subjective measure. And it's obviously an evolved instinct, because imagine, like, when we were primitive creatures, you want to chase the same mouse for 20 hours, and you've eaten a mouse, you've got 50 calories after spending 2,000 on it. That's not, it's not a good survival mechanism. So the brain's conscious of the effort versus reward outcome. But we can override that in an emotional sense. We can say, okay, so yes, I will be emotionally unhappy or negative emotions when I'm cleaning, but the end result, I'll be even more happy. Okay, that'll outweigh that. The effort will have been worth it. We can make these cognitive analyses, and say the spring factor will be a part of it too, because external factors will affect our emotions. So when it is dark outside, there's no daylight, we do get just more miserable more often, because we recognize boundaries and time and stuff. So when it's dark already, that's end of the day.
Yeah.
It's only 4 o'clock. You haven't done anything yet, so that can be emotionally dispiriting. Also, I think it's important to be aware that your emotions aren't all in sync. You just point them there; they all go this way, they all go that way. They rival each other. Our emotions are constantly pulling in different directions. One example used in the book is that if you see a delicious cupcake just standing there unattended, you can eat it. Of course, you'll go towards it and eat it. But if that cupcake is on a rickety bridge or a volcano, you'll think, good, yes, delicious cupcake. I want. Oh no, imminent death. I don't want. And those little, usually the imminent death one wins out, but some people just love cupcakes, I guess. But it's important to be aware there are different factors at work here. So striking that balance and sort of knowing which emotion to trust, or at least to defer to, is a big part of the thinking of it. So yeah, there's lots of different things that come to motivation.
Yeah, I guess one of the key things would be thinking of the outcome, the long-term outcome, rather than the short-term outcome, and focusing on that to try and get yourself motivated if you need that motivation. Claire's asked, how many defined emotions are there? This might be a difficult question with no answer.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. There's it really depends on who you ask, which school of thought you is. I think the Paul Ekman's like pivotal emotional, like primary emotions, there was 7: anger, happiness, disgust, fear, sadness, surprise, and one more. I think I can't remember what it is now. But anyway, that was like the benchmark for a long time. Then people studied the data on that and said actually anger and fear are sort of the same emotion spun in different directions. There's only 5 or 4. Like disgust and anger also have some people link those together. So and is surprise an emotion? Is that no? A lot of people find that ironically surprising. Like I said, a surprise an emotion. But it's not like any others. It's very fleeting. It doesn't have really positive or negative. You can have a bad surprise and good surprise, but they're not like, that's not part of the surprise itself. It's just that wasn't expected. It happened. Then it goes away. So it's not like enduring like other emotions are. So, but it's got a facial expression. Like that's a very well-known facial reaction. So that's that side of the coin anyway. But then these are all the ones based on people's facial expressions. And then it was acknowledged that not everyone has, a facial expression for each emotion. Or things like, what does a guilty person look like? You can see him guilty, you can look guilty, but there's no sort of obvious that is a guilty face benchmark. Same with shame. People don't look ashamed, but this is more of a gestalt. It's a whole body thing. Or embarrassment. What does an embarrassed person look like? What sort of facial expression? You go red, maybe, but that's a whole different thing, which is covered in the book. That might be a big part of why we have color perception in the first place. But then that's the whole primary emotion field in itself. So even though people who believe there are distinct standalone emotions can't agree on how many there are and what they should be. And on the other side, you have the constructivist view, which says that there's no one particular suite of emotions we all have or we all rely on. They're all created, in the moment, on the fly. And we learn which ones are more relevant when. But, they're not sort of, kept in aspic. They are actually just created there and then, like from the fluid of affect. So, there's lots of different arguments there. And no one's going to agree on that for a while, I think. I think it'll be quite some time before there's any sort of consensus.
It kind of makes sense how our emotions change over time based on loads of different factors, because obviously children will have different emotions to adults. Like children get so excited or so happy over something that we wouldn't jump around and run around the yard anymore, like it was something that was really happy. And I guess this changes for like societal context and different things. You can never really define an emotion as like a permanent thing, I guess. Lisa's commented, looking forward to reading this. Can you give an idiot's guide to how the emotions relate to thinking and learning?
It's can I give an idiot's guide? Well, you've come to the right place. I could say. There's lots of different aspects there, lots of different things. I can't go into all of it because we've only got like another half hour. But because of the way the brain works, or like it's the systems we use to learn things, to remember things, is like very old. We've been doing it for millions upon millions of years. The history of our species and our ancestors and progenitor species. The ability to think rationally, to analyze and objectively say this is important, this isn't. That's a new arrival in our sort of suite of cognitive abilities. So the system we use to decide, for our memory use at least, decide what's important, what's not, still tends to rely on emotions. Which is why, if something's important in the intellectual objective sense, like the things you need to learn for an exam, or things to pass your course, or the things you need to do for you, these are important, by any measure. Like if you don't do this, I will not be promoted, I will not pass my exam, I will not be able to finish my course. But they don't have any particular emotional resonance because it's usually abstract information. It's just like stuff which doesn't have any particular emotional significance. So your brain struggles to retain that. You have to revise it and rehearse it. Whereas if it's something which has a strong emotional impact on you, it will be very easily remembered. So like if you study for months for an exam, you pass the exam, you may never think of that information again. There might just be a matter of no memory of it, like a month or two later. So I study that. But if something mortifyingly embarrassing happens to you, or particularly when you're a teenager, that stays with you forever. You can be walking on the street and suddenly the memory just pops up and you just cringe into a ball on the floor. that is a big, because that emotional memory is there. Like the emotional content of a memory is like it's like a sort of a label that says very important, like a priority into the memory system. So, things which have an emotional significance will be easily remembered. So that obviously is a big part of learning. And they've done studies, especially with children, like if they have an emotional attachment to a positive emotional attachment, a negative one can work too, but in different ways, to the person teaching the information, that information tends to be retained better. Like just studying some American children, and like they were taught some maths by two characters. One was like Elmo, Sesame Street, everyone knows. One was like a Taiwanese children's character they'd never seen before. And the children remembered the same information from Elmo much better than the Taiwanese character. Then the follow-up to that study, these children were given like lots of experience of the Taiwanese character, like they'd play with the merchandise and the toys and watch the TV shows. A few months later, they learned just as well from them as well. So they developed an emotional affection for this character now. So if you have an emotional attachment to someone, you tend to learn better from them because you are invested in what they say. What they say does carry an emotional weight, does carry an emotional salience for you. It's like if you have a favorite teacher, you tend to like that subject more. Teacher you don't like, you tend to want to avoid that subject. So, yeah, that's just one way which emotions have a big part in how we learn and remember things.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I was thinking as you were talking about that, how teachers can affect your favorite subject so much. I remember being in school, and some years I would love it, and I can remember loads of different things from those years. And then the years that I didn't have a teacher that I liked, all I can remember is that I didn't like the teacher. I can't really remember anything we learned or anything we did. I just thought, I didn't like that teacher. Yeah, that's really interesting. Amy's got a brilliant question. She said, lots of people are talking about AI right now, and you've mentioned how AI isn't great at emotions. Why do you think this is, and do you think AI will improve its ability to create or replicate emotions?
It's a trick. Actually, just gone a bit. There we go. Well,
okay.
Am I back?
Yeah? Yep, you're back.
Okay, good. Yeah, well, it all comes down to the fact, like I say, like we can't seem to define emotions. We don't sort of know how to describe them, but we see them, we recognize them. Emotions are something which are like an integral part of how our brain just processes everything.
Oh, I think Dean has lost connection, unfortunately. Hopefully he'll be back soon. But yeah, I'll have a look at all of your comments. Lisa said it's an excellent response, which I completely agree, Lisa. And your research sounds great, looking how to stimulate emotional responses in higher education. Oh, Dean, I think I just heard you. Yeah, you're back.
Okay. Yeah, it's better.
Your camera's still lagging, but I can hear you.
Okay, weird. Don't know what's happening here. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. Can you still hear me? Is this all right?
Yeah, I can hear you completely fine, but your mouth doesn't match the words. Oh, it's matching now. I think you're back in sync.
Okay, cool. Where did I leave off from your perspective?
On AI, on Amy's question about AI and not being good at emotions.
Isn't it weird? I started criticizing AI and suddenly my internet connection went down.
That's creepy.
Not at all troubling, is it? Yeah. Yeah. So, like I say, emotions are such an integral part of the human brain and how we process everything and nothing. And that's something which is really hard to teach a machine to do when we can't do it ourselves. Even we don't know what we don't understand it. But just people in the technological world, they don't take emotions into account as much as they should. There's loads of different software which helps you recognize emotions from camera views and people's facial expressions, but it's so much more.
Oh dear. I think Dean's lost connection again. And that was a really interesting answer as well. But I'm sure he'll be back soon. So if you do have any more questions, just put them in and we'll get to them when Dean is back. Yeah, about AI, it could be interesting if any of you have any questions. I know quite a few people who are concerned about AI's ability to write and take jobs in terms of writing poetry and things. So it would be interesting to hear if you guys have any concerns that Dean could help with. Yeah, I don't think Dean has connection. Oh, yeah, Claire said AI mimicking voices is scary. Okay, I think Dean is back, but I think the team will just be turning back on his camera, probably. I'm not. Oh yeah, AI and audiobook narration as well. That's true. Dean actually talks about that in the book, so I might ask him a few questions about that for any of our members who are here. I'm just asking Dean about his camera connection. But yeah, it would be good to talk about audiobooks because obviously we are an audiobook charity. And Dean does actually talk about audiobooks, so that would be great to get onto. I wonder if Dean's camera seems to be working, but can any of you tell me if you can see Dean, or is it just me? I don't know if I'm the only one who can't see him. Okay, thanks everyone. Yeah, I think someone from the Virtual Village Hall team just might need to allow him back in. He's in the backstage area now. So he'll be back any moment, hopefully. And yeah, Claire, I will ask him if he would read his own books in audio, which would be great. But the audiobook is narrated by Matt Addis, I think, who, if any of you listen to audiobooks, you'll know he's quite a popular narrator, and he's very good. So I hope that we'll be able to talk about that a bit. Okay, thanks everyone. I think he'll be back in soon. Yeah, while we're waiting, I wonder if anyone has any responses to what Dean's been saying so far. It's obviously been really interesting and quite a lot to take in how different emotions work. How, for me, it's much more complex than what I originally thought it would be. I thought it was just, happy, sad, angry, shock. But obviously that isn't the case. And it's crazy how much it affects. Lisa was saying how it can affect higher education and responses to learning. Lisa said, as we have lost Dean, can we have him back for another talk? I think Dean should be coming back, hopefully. But yes, hopefully we would be able to get Dean back if he can't get back in. Claire's asked, what did you think of the book? What did I think of the book? I really liked the book. It was really helpful for me to think about my emotions in a different way. I'm just replying to Dean, sorry. But yeah, it was great to kind of, instead of learning about how to control them or repress them, it was good to be able to understand them and understand how and why they're made and how they're actually helpful. I think that kind of gives a different perspective on not feeling so bad about your emotions and kind of appreciating why they're there, which isn't really something that I've thought of before. Hopefully we'll get to talk to Dean about this. I'm really sorry for everyone who's joined to speak to Dean and not me. I wonder, I'll just email the team. New comments. Okay, Lisa's got another question. Is there anything in his research that has provoked an emotional response in him, e.g. fascination, pleasure, joy, etc.? That would be really good to find out. But I think it is definitely interesting how having an emotional connection to a topic can help to help your remembering it. I I never even considered that, but it makes so much sense now looking back to when I was in school, and I can never seem to remember any maths. Oh, Dean, you're back.
Oh, yeah.
Hi.
I listened for like 5 minutes now, honestly. I've been sat there, I was enjoying it. It was good. I was like,
I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't let you in. But I'm glad that you're back now.
Yeah. Before you go on, I will say I have actually, years ago, I asked if I could be the one to read the audiobooks. I asked Audible, and we actually had a little trial, and they said, we'll probably get a professional in. So to the point where actually for my 4th book, Psychological, which was an audiobook first, I lost my friends contributing because of mental health, and they've been through the system. They said they can do it, but you can't. So I'm the only one not my own audiobook. So much as I'd like to, it has been deemed this voice isn't the most conducive to a relaxing listen. So
I would disagree. I love the Welsh accent, as you know.
I guess it's an acquired taste, but there we go.
Yeah.
Regarding the AI thing, I say, which is clearly I've upset our robot overlords. Yeah, I say like the whole fact is emotions are far more complex, and the people involved in the technical world don't really, in my experience, acknowledge or appreciate or even aware of that. So like the things you program into AI aren't, they don't take the full emotional gamut into account. So I guess AI can only work with the information it's got. I think it would be, over time of practice, they could sort of replicate or mimic emotions more effectively. But I don't think we'll ever get to that point. I don't think you'll ever get to the point that AI replaces all art, because there's a clean emotional quality which machines cannot do. And we are so sensitive to emotional information. The example I always use is that obviously we're based in the UK. We do have, shall we say, an unreliable train system. So if you've been on a train station platform, the train's late, because it always is, you'll get I am sorry to report that the 1713 train to London Paddington is delayed by approximately 12 minutes. I am deeply sorry for the delay to this train. And it's not reassuring, it's really annoying, because you're not sorry, you're a recorded voice. You are incapable of feeling, you're just lying to me about emotions, which we react really badly to. So yeah, I think AI doesn't get that, and I don't think it can get that until it has emotions itself, in which case, that's a whole other area.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, AI might have been a bit angry about what you were saying, because the technology obviously kicks you out. So maybe it does have emotions after all. But Amy asked about AI in audiobook narration as well. You do actually touch on that in the book. I
do, yeah.
You gave us a shout out to the audiobook listeners that they'd be listening to a real human rather than a machine. Why do you think this is important, that we listen to a real human?
Well, I think there are sort of pushes to get more AI audio narration. Like my son watches those YouTube shorts. A lot of them have it.
Yeah.
And when it's a 30-second clip, you can sort of, fine. But it's still off, isn't it? It's still sort of very, like, this thing happened. Like, it's got this sort of really weird clipped and artificial vocal tone. Just better than the old days of, like, auto narration, like sort of like blah, 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 some sort of robot voice. But there's more nuance now, but it's still clearly not real. And when it's 30 seconds, you just let it slide. But nobody likes it. Like, we have evolved for millions of years. Our main source of information, aside from the visual, is other people speaking to us. We think in audio narration terms. That's our internal monologue. So if you try to give us that information in emotionally non-salient ways or emotionally wrong ways, we won't listen to it. We won't process it. We'll find it jarring. So some people just can't. The audiobook people think I'm one of those people who you just can't listen to for very long, because they have a sort of very, like, someone drones on. Like, you tune out, don't you? You can't focus on it, and you need someone with the ability to deliver an emotional resonance to the work in order to actually listen to it for long periods. When you're reading, it's different. You can insert it yourself. If you're listening to it, you're more of a passive participant. Then you need someone to do that work for you. And I don't think it will be anytime soon when machines can mimic that effectively, the way we can't tell the difference.
No. It's actually made me think of a talk I went to recently with work. It was an EdTech conference, and there were a group of pupils from the National Star College. It's a charity in the UK, and they provide further education for people with disabilities. And one of the boys was using assistive technology to speak, which was incredible to see. But his whole talk was about how he's on a personal quest right now to find a voice for his machine that matches his family and where he's from. In his case, it was a Birmingham accent. So why do you think that voice can cause such a strong emotional response in people?
Well, it's one of the ways in which we identify people. Everyone has their own particularly unique voice. You might get some people with very, very similar voices, but much like your face, much like your fingerprints, it's a part of it's your identity. And I think Stephen Hawking was the most famous example of someone who couldn't talk and had a voice machine do it for him. But it wasn't his, it wasn't his actual voice, was it? It was we're talking very old tech at this point, and it was miraculous that it could happen at all. But also, if you're used to speaking with a certain voice, and if you have the ability to communicate with it, but something's off, then it's not right. Like if someone, people wear clothes like, this isn't me, it doesn't suit me. That can be jarring. That can be uncomfortable. If the whole outward expression is such a deep emotional, context for us, the emotional connection to who we are and how we see ourselves. That's actually a very important thing. So, so like your voice is you. Much like many of your physical features, and if they would suddenly be changed by someone else, it is off-putting. It does feel wrong. So like we aren't like Lego. We aren't just an assemblage of different parts just put together. We are a coherent whole, and when something's not right, we feel it quite strongly.
I wonder if because your book is so personal for a lot of it, about your experience growing up in Wales or when you sadly lost your father, did it ever feel strange to you having someone else's voice read out the words that you've written and your story?
Yeah, it's an odd one because I know Matt now. We actually we communicated beforehand. I did request a Welsh person at least if it's going to be me. I imagine. Well, I think the the audiobook in the US for the first book, Idiot Brain, was an American narrator, which must have been weird to listen to. I heard it myself, but it's just strange to think of that. I was born in Wales. I don't think you were.
Yeah,
but,
I wonder how they would have pronounced Ponte Kyber.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's obviously there's a quirk of that. But I met Matt when we went to the launch of the psychological. Like, it was an audiobook first, and it was very weird being in the same room as him. It's sort of like it's like a Doctor Who special. I'm me, and you're also me, and we both met, and that's it's crossing the timeline sort of thing. But it's when you hear it back, it's one of those things. Again, it's a strange emotional experience that I'm guessing only I could possibly have. Very unique to me, because I'm listening to like, hello, I'm Dean Burnett. And I'm like, no, I am. you're someone else entirely. So it is odd. It's strange. It's in a sort of interesting way. It's not like uncomfortable, but it's just weird.
Yeah.
But I'm sort of more sanguine about it because I've never expected to be someone who I don't expect to be known for my voice. It's not something I invest in terms of my output. I do a lot of podcasts because I'm a white male in his 40s. It's like I don't have a podcast. Like, will you be my podcast? Is how we say hello these days. But but it's it's not something I've sort of I've always been more someone who expresses himself more with his writing. I like talking to people. I like doing stuff, but like the writing is that's me first and foremost. So someone else doing it right is reassuring for me. I actually like that, but I don't. But I can imagine how some people would find it weird. If you put your heart and soul into your work and you want to be the one to be the voice of it, and you're not, that must be strange. Yeah.
Yeah. We've got a question from Frank, who's asked, is there any scientifically discernible differences between emotions in healthy people and those experienced as part of psychiatric illness?
I think it's more about the quality and quantity rather than any sort of tangible differences. I mean, people with anxiety experience more fear. That's just like the whole point of it. And obviously fear has, there's a whole spectrum of that. You can have low level nerves and you can have intense panic. These are all part of the same spectrum in that respect. So I don't think there's any sort of qualitative difference between the nature of the emotions people who experience. But again, it's also one of those things, how would we know? Like, how would you be able to say this person who's in the middle of a psychotic break, they're not going to be able to sit there and explain their emotions in words. which are themselves like a kind of a clunky, coarse tool for explaining emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, like when I think this in my in that psychological book. Words sometimes let us down when it comes to the nuances of scientific concepts like emotions, like health. I mean, if you look at the dictionary, the one I found at least says, if you look, what's the definition of illness? Like the experience of experiencing a period of sickness. Okay, go to sickness. What is sickness? The feeling of being ill. Okay, thank you for that. That's really helpful. It's just a circular reasoning. So, if someone were experiencing a different emotional state, how would we know? How would we experience? But then, if you go by the constructive point of view, everyone is always experiencing unique, bespoke emotions. It's just that they have very similar qualities to the ones everyone else does. It's an outward manifestation is recognizable.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole idea of like what is and isn't a certain emotion is kind of hard to establish because they are so nebulous in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Lisa's asked a question as well. Is there anything in your research, Dean, that has provoked an emotional response? For example, fascination, pleasure, joy?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff I've written, I don't know what the emotion would be. I think awe is too strong. Like, sort of like, whoa, that sort of, oh yeah, of course. Like when things sort of click into place, or like when you open up a new door and, oh, look at all this in here. That, it's a type of happiness. It's back to curiosity, like you say, but it's almost like satisfied curiosity. But what's it called when you satisfy curiosity you didn't know you had? Because it's like, oh, I didn't know any of this. I never even thought about it. And like I mentioned it from the off, that the idea that people sort of insist that emotions are a hindrance, a barrier to logical, rational thinking, and but it turns out that if you don't have emotions, you wouldn't really think logically because you have no reason to. In the logical abstract sense, like so I'm going to research this this disease to cure it. Why? Then because people will not die. So, yeah, but what do you care? Everyone's going to die eventually, and so it becomes very nihilistic, very reductive, very quickly. I think about the idea, scientists are meant to be these super rational, super logical people who keep emotions out, but without emotions, we wouldn't have any scientists.
Yeah.
Because it's not, it's not the most obviously rewarding field. If you just want the money and the power, there are easier ways to do it.
Yeah.
Being a scientist involves, modest wages a lot of the time. Moving from country to country to follow the research grants, putting your work, dedicating your life to this experiment, which could take years. It might turn out no results which are useful.
Yeah.
But you've got to be emotionally invested in something to want to do that in the first place. There's no logical argument to do it. You've got to want to, and that is an emotional response.
Yeah, exactly. That's made me think of one of my friends who she's a scientist, and one of her experiments that she was doing was just looking after these little liver organoids again every single day, checking on them, making sure they were all okay. And in my head, I was thinking, why would you do this? Like, it seems so boring, but obviously she is passionate about it, and you can't, even though science seems so rational, you can't separate the passion from it. Oh, Lisa said, I need to cite that beautiful quote. If we didn't have emotions, we wouldn't think rationally. Fantastic. Okay. Yeah, I agree, Lisa.
Take it if you like. Yes, more welcome.
I am looking at the time, and I think that we're going to have to wrap things up, which I feel terrible about because obviously we had the technical issues. But I think we do have time for one more question, which I will ask just to finish us off. Obviously, you give a lot of knowledge, you impart a lot of wisdom about emotions throughout the book in many different aspects. But if there was one thing that you could hope readers or listeners would take away from emotional ignorance, what would that be?
Okay, there's a lot of stuff in there, but I think one thing I would keep coming back to is like a lot of stuff in the modern world is like the whole toxic positivity motion. And this whole idea that you have to be happy all the time, or things, or something is wrong. That's really unhelpful, genuinely harmful, I think. But I think it's important to appreciate all the emotions. That we have this whole suite of emotional abilities in our heads, in our brains, and our bodies, which produce all these different emotional reactions, and they're all valid. You shouldn't let them all have their free reign all the time. That's a totally different thing. But the idea that we need to control and suppress our emotions is a genuinely harmful one, and they do so much for us, and they have such an important part to play in our very existence, that the more people understand that and acknowledge that, the better. And they're more complex than people give them credit for. So, yeah, I think as long as people come away with a better understanding of emotions, I think that would be helpful all around.
Yeah, no, it was for me, and I'm sure it will be for anyone else who's going to go away and read it or listen to it. But yeah, I think that's all we have time for. But thank you so much, Dean, for joining us. Sorry about the technical difficulties. And thank you to everyone else as well for all of your amazing questions. They've been so interesting. And yeah, thanks for sticking with us when the technical problems were happening. And thanks to the Virtual Village Hall too for helping us to host this session. They've got loads of events every week, so definitely check them out. But yeah, I'm going to have to head, sorry. But just as a reminder before we go, we are an audiobook charity called Listening Books. We have thousands of audiobooks, including Emotional Ignorance by Dr. Dean Burnett. So thank you, Dean, and thank you everyone for joining us. I'll see you soon. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.